And today's movie starts in 1935, set in the home of the wealthy Tallis family. Briony Tallis, who is 13 years old, is the younger daughter of the family with big dreams to be a writer, and she lives with her mom and her sister Cecilia. Cecilia has returned home for the summer from Cambridge, where she'd been studying with Robbie, the housekeeper's son. The Tallises are being visited by young relatives, Lola and her twin brother from the north. Briony was writing a play to perform for her brother Leon and rehearsing the play with her cousins Lola and the twins. After reading the play, Briony looks out the window and she notices Cecilia and Robbie engaged in some sort of argument by the fountain. Robbie seems to be shouting at Cecilia, and Cecilia stripped naked and got inside the water, and the whole situation was bizarre for Briony. She interrupts the whole incident as Robbie forces Cecilia to undress against her will. And then we suddenly see the same scene from the point of view of Cecilia and Robbie as they were talking while walking into the garden. Cecilia was holding an expensive vase as she tried to fill it with water from the fountain, and Robbie tried to take it from her to fill it and she refuses, and as they were pulling on it they ended up breaking the very expensive vase. It then falls inside the fountain and Robbie warns her not to step on the broken pieces, and Cecilia, feeling very angry, strips to her underwear and dives into the fountain to retrieve the missing pieces of the vase. After Cecilia comes out of the water, Robbie looked at her longingly for a moment and looked away respectfully. And feeling very pissed, Cecilia takes the vase out of his hand and storms away. Later that day, Leon arrives with his friend Paul Marshall. Cecilia, Leon and his friend were cooling off by the lake as Paul tells them about his chocolate factory and how he plans to sell the chocolate bars to the British military. Leon informs Cecilia that he's invited Robbie to dinner, and Cecilia feels upset by this because she still didn't forgive Robbie. We then see Paul wandering through the house and he finds Lola and the twins fighting, and he entertains the twins, but he also flirts with Lola, and it's obvious that something is going on here because they share a lot of eye contact. Yeah. And next, Robbie is seen writing a letter to Cecilia trying to apologize for his behavior earlier that day. He actually writes 2 letters. In one of them he writes a very dirty letter explaining his burning desire for Cecilia, and in the other a very heartfelt apology. And he ends up confusing the dirty letter with the formal one and places the dirty letter in the envelope which he asks Briony to deliver to Cecilia. And when he realizes what he's done, he calls out to Briony, but she was too far away to hear him, and unfortunately Briony reads the letter before giving it to Cecilia. Briony goes down to her room as Lola follows her and complains about her brothers giving her bruises and stuff, but Briony was too busy getting shocked by the letter when Lola was complaining about her brothers. She tells Lola about the letter and she calls Robbie a dangerous maniac, and Briony then goes down the stairs to have dinner where she finds an open door, and she goes in to find Cecilia and Robbie in a very awkward position against the wall, and her little fragile mind couldn't handle what she was witnessing, and she thought that Robbie was raping her sister. But immediately after, we see their perspective, and Robbie and Cecilia were alone in the library, at which time he apologizes to Cecilia for the dirty letter, and she admits that she's never actually thought of anything that he wrote before, and she was surprised by it, and to his surprise, she confesses her secret love for him, and they start making out, and they make love against the bookshelf. And that's when Cecilia saw Briony watching them with a tearful eye, and they both walked out of the library and left her alone. And at dinner, they all pretend nothing happened, and nervous and confused, Briony starts talking about Lola's bruises and how the twins attacked her, and she shows everyone the bruises on her wrists. And Leon tells Lola to wipe the smeared chapstick across her face, and we see Paul getting uncomfortable by both their comments. And at this point, Mrs. Tallis notices that the young twin boys aren't at dinner, so Briony is sent to get them. She comes back down and informs the group that the boys have run away, and the entire family joins efforts to find them. Briony takes a flashlight and sets out alone and stumbles across a man with his pants down on top of Lola. As soon as the flashlight shines on them, the unknown man runs away. Lola was scared and begins to cry, and Briony runs up to her and asks her who the man was. And Lola tells her that she wasn't sure as he was behind her, but Briony convinces her that it was Robbie. She tells her that she saw him, and a confused Lola doesn't say a word and agrees with Briony's accusations. They then take Lola away as Briony testifies that it was Robbie who attacked her, and she's sure that she saw him. She gives the very explicit letter to her mom, and now things are not really good for Robbie. And later, Robbie, who finds the twins unharmed, returns to the house to see everyone waiting for him suspiciously. All clues point to Robbie's guilt, and he gets arrested, but before going to prison, Cecilia hugs him and tells him that she loves him and asks him to return to her. And 4 years later, Robbie was out of prison, and the young man agreed to join the army and fight in the Battle of France. And he was sent as part of the British military to northern France in an attempt to halt a Nazi advance. And in northern France, France, Robbie and two fellow soldiers attempt to make their way to Dunkirk, where the remnants of the British forces are to be evacuated. Robbie was ill due to an infected open wound, but he still manages to arrive at the beaches of Dunkirk. As he lays down, he thinks back to 6 months earlier when he met Cecilia before he left London. Cecilia has become a nurse now in London and is living in an apartment and doesn't speak to her sister Briony and her family anymore. And after a very awkward conversation, they end up declaring their love for each other. She gives him a photograph of a seaside cottage near Dover where they can retire to, and they kiss as he leaves for France again. Briony, now 18 years old, also has become a nurse, and she joins Cecilia's old nursing unit at St. Thomas Hospital in London rather than go to university at Cambridge. And she's at the hospital trying to adjust to her work, and she feels guilty for what happened despite still believing that Robbie was Lola's rapist. Briony keeps writing to Cecilia and never getting an answer, and she admits to her friend that she once had a crush on Robbie when she was 10-11 years old, and she jumped into a river to see if he'll save her, which he did. And the foolish attempt to seek Robbie's attention led Robbie to angrily scold Briony, and when she told him about how she feels, he tells her that he only sees her as a little sister, and her feelings for him after that just disappeared. And later on, Briony learns from the news that Paul Marshall, who now owns a factory supplying rations to the British Army, is about to marry Lola. She decides to attend the wedding, and during the ceremony, she has an insight that it was Paul who was on top of Lola that night. And from this she understands why Lola lied about the whole incident. And it was actually because Lola was actually having consensual intercourse with Paul that night, but she didn't want anybody to find out. Because at the time, Paul was already showing interest in Lola, but she was just 15, and even though they liked each other, if they were discovered, it would have been an enormous scandal that would have ruined both of their lives. And you guys remember the bruises on her wrists? Yeah, the twins didn't do that. It was actually Paul who was trying to get his hands on Lola before dinner that day. So the marriage was sort of an arrangement to prevent Paul and Lola from testifying against each other, and after this shocking realization, Briony rushes to Cecilia's place to personally apologize for what she did, but she was surprised to see Robbie living there with her sister. Briony suggests correcting her testimony, to which Cecilia responds by saying that she's an unreliable witness. And Briony repeatedly apologizes for her betrayal, but Robbie was so angry that he wanted to break her neck, as she still hasn't fully accepted responsibility for her actions. Robbie then orders her to go to her parents and to tell them that her evidence is false, and to write everything about the situation and how it went down, and Cecilia adds that Paul just married Lola, and now Lola will not be able to testify against her husband because they're married. They then hear a voice of a woman saying, "I'm sorry, can we stop for a moment?" And we cut to the present day and the year 1999, and Briony in her late 70s is a famous novelist, and she's being interviewed about her latest book titled Atonement. She explains how it's her last book because she's dying and she wanted to be completely honest about the events of the situation, but she admits, however, that she wasn't honest about one part. The part where she went down to her sister that day to beg for forgiveness, and about how she encountered Robbie there as he was living with her sister, and that was all a lie because Robbie actually died of his wounds in France. The foregoing narrative has been one she created for her book as an act of atonement for what she did to Robbie and Cecilia, and it was all fiction. And her story in the book ends the way that it does, with Robbie and Cecilia living their lives together because Briony truly felt the pain that she caused them, and she decided to give them a happy ending in her book even though they couldn't have it in real life. She also says that she never got to set things straight with her sister Cecilia because she died a few months after Robbie when a German bomb burst a water main and flooded the subway tunnel in which her and a bunch of other people in London were taking refuge in. And the movie ends just as Briony wrote it, and we see Robbie and Cecilia walking down the beach on a bright, beautiful day. And this is how today's recap comes to its conclusion. I hope you guys enjoyed our recaps. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and most of all, subscribe to my channel. And I love you guys so much, and I promise to see you on my next recap. Bye.